Spider-Man the New Animated Series is a 3D animated cartoon produced in 2003 by MTV. But like most animated shows of the early 2000s on MTV, it did not last long. It got cancelled after only one season. However, because it was an MTV show, it was geared towards an older audience, which means that it had more freedom than any other Spider-Man show. Now it could actually punch villains! Oh, and people can actually die now. There's not a lot of blood, but there's this one scene where a guy gets his head chopped off, which really made me go, oh shit. Not because the deaths were gruesome, but more because I'm watching a guy dressing up in blue and red spandex, which symbolizes a spider somehow, being a hero, and then murder happens. The show was originally gonna be an adaptation of the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, which explains why Spider-Man has those really big eyes. But then the Spider-Man movie came out and the series instead became a continuation of the movie where Peter is now in college. Even though it's supposed to be a continuation of the movie, it doesn't really show, except for the fact that Norman Osborn is dead and Harry hates Spider-Man now. Aunt May is also absent from the series because MTV thought having an elderly person on screen would alienate their teen audience. And yes, it's exactly as stupid as it sounds. The characters also don't really act like their movie equivalent. For example, while Harry is also a rich dude, he's more chill and relaxed. While in the movie he's more angry and stressed out. He also jokes more in the show.
Hey Harry, 007 just called. He wants his life back.
Osborn. Harry Osborn.
Mary Jane thankfully has more of a personality than in the movie. I mean, it's not perfect and she definitely isn't the Mary Jane from the comics, but it's still an improvement. Peter Parker's Spider-Man is the closest to his movie equivalent. That's mainly because the movie, in my eyes, captured Spider-Man pretty well. The series also introduces a new main character / love interest for Peter called Indy. No, not that one. She's an assistant reporter who wants to make it big, and Peter helps her with supplying footage of Spider-Man. They also have this little love triangle between her, Mary Jane, and Peter. This time it's done more realistic, with them actually confronting Peter, saying he has to make a choice at some point because they're both getting fed up with Peter kind of trying to get both. The show of course also introduces a lot of villains. Some pre-existing, but most made up for the show. Well, most new villains are kind of like pre-existing villains but different. For example, in the episode Keeping Secret, we for example have a character who's a cat burglar who flirts with Spider-Man but isn't Black Cat. Because they were afraid it was racist? Because they were afraid people would be pissed off if they turned Black Cat black? Like, don't get me wrong, it's still a good episode. It's just kind of weird why they didn't do that. The show also has villains like Pterodax, who are like a mix between the Shocker and the Vulture. Some of the villains in the show are not handled incredibly well. Turbojet and the Lizard felt a little underdeveloped, although their designs are still really good. Thankfully, most of the villains are done actually well, like Chiquita and Electro. Hell, this interpretation of Electro might actually be my favorite. They even introduced him as Max Dillon first. Unless you watched them when MTV first aired them, because for some reason they aired the episode where he becomes Electro first, and then later they aired the episode where they introduced Max Dillon, which is really weird. There's one episode I really want to highlight, which doesn't even really have a villain. It's the same episode that first introduces Max Dillon. It's called Head Over Heels. And it's about Peter coming late to class. So instead of Max Dillon being his lab partner, this hot loony goth girl becomes his lab partner. And she tries to read his mind with this weird device, which instead of reading Peter's mind, electrocutes the girl. And she becomes deranged, thinking Spider-Man is talking to her and telling her what to do.
How do you lure the amazing Spider-Man to you? What do heroes do?
They save people?
She shoots, she scores. Go catch yourself a spider.
I really like seeing her getting more insane and taking it to higher extremes. She started off very simple, with the Spider-Man in her head, telling her that she needs to seek Spider-Man attention, so she throws herself off a building. Thankfully, Spider-Man does sweeping and save her. But he does tell her that, what the fuck lady, I don't know you, why are you doing this? And eventually it ends with her trying to kill Mary Jane, so she'll be the only girl in Spidey's life. There's also a scene where she tries to read Spider-Man's mind to find out who he really is. And she thinks Spider-Man's actually Wong, the coffee guy.
He loves me. He just doesn't know how to show it. But now, we can finally be together since I know his biggest secret.
Yeah, what's that?
Under that Spider-Man mask, it really is Wang, the Drip Den guy.
Got us a head injury here.
Yes.
2 cc's of
Wang
Demerol.
is my
Stat, let's
Spidey.
move.
Plus,
Which is a funny nod to the voice actor being the same guy who voiced Spider-Man in Spider-Man Unlimited. This episode was kind of a different side of Spider-Man's story, but I still thought it was like really interesting and handled incredibly well. The show also has some pretty good voice acting, especially the one-off characters and the villains just sound great. They have some like really stellar performances. They even got Keith David to voice a character. Sadly, the voice actress for Mary Jane, Lisa Liu, sometimes sounds a little wooden. I mean, most of the time she sounds okay, but it's not like stellar voice acting. And in my eyes, Neil Patrick Harris does like a really good job portraying Spider-Man and Peter Parker. I mean, he's not my favorite Spider-Man, but he's definitely a good one. Now that I've talked about the characters and the voice acting, it's time to talk about the animation. Sadly, because the animation is 3D, it has not aged incredibly well. The cell shading definitely helps it, and it's not like the animation is awful, it's just dated really. The thing that looks the worst is probably Spidey's web when it's trying to be more detailed. The face movements, however, are done well and are quite detailed. The motion capture mixes well with the normal animation and face movements, thankfully. And the fight choreography is very fluent, exciting, and in my eyes it's actually on par with Spectacular Spider-Man's action. And it might even be a little bit better in the episode Sword of Chiquita. Another thing I love in the show is the music. I'm a sucker for electro synth music, and my lifelong dream of watching Spider-Man fight Electro with electro music in the background is fulfilled. Sadly, the soundtrack has never been officially released, so there's no real way to listen to the full and clean versions of the song, which really sucks. Now I want to talk about the season finale, which has some spoilers in it, so here's your spoiler warning. If you haven't watched the last 2 episodes of this series, please skip to this time code to avoid spoilers. So the last 2 episodes are called Mind Games Part 1 and Part 2, or as I like to call them, Mind Fuck, because that's basically what it is. And they serve as the finale for the show. And I gotta say, it's really good. Part 1 starts off with the Gaines twins on the transport and breaking free, but Spider-Man swoops in and defeats them and saves the day. Then Pterodax wreak havoc on the Science Center, and Silver Sable and Kraven team up to fight Spider-Man. Spider-Man defeats them all except for Kraven, who gets away. Spider-Man then reveals to Mary Jane he's Peter Parker, but Kraven decides to ruin the moment by bursting in and eventually killing Mary Jane. We cut to the funeral and Stan Lee tells Peter he should get revenge on Kraven. It then turns out that almost this entire episode was just a mind game played on Spider-Man by the twins to get him to kill Kraven. This is a death fake out done right. Because 1, the reason as to why the fake out happened is a really good one and makes a lot of sense. And 2, we find out very quickly, in the same episode even, that she isn't actually dead. This way the audience won't feel cheated when it's revealed. Mind Games Part 2 starts off with Spider-Man going to fight Kraven, but he eventually figures out he's been brainwashed and that Kraven didn't actually kill MJ. He tracks down the twins and fights them, only for him to be tricked into severely injuring Indy. He goes after the twins again and this time captures one, while the other gets killed in an accident. But even though Spider-Man beat the twins, they still broke him. Peter thinks that Spider-Man might just do more bad than good, and gives up being Spider-Man altogether, and the episode ends. Sadly, the new animated series never got renewed for another season because even though it had a good reception, it just didn't get enough people watching. I think this is mainly because I don't think an average teenager is going to be like, oh fuck yeah, I can't wait for this Spider-Man cartoon on MTV. So just like Clone High and Undergrads before it, it only has 13 episodes, and its cliffhanger was never resolved. Because of this and the fact that the animation is dated means a lot of people shrug it off and assume it's not worth watching. But it really is. If it weren't for the fact that Spectacular Spider-Man exists, this would be the best Spider-Man TV show. Because it has good writing, good music, good action. And I just really like the show. Please, MTV or Sony or whoever owns the rights of the show, just let them get our Blu-ray and a CD for the soundtrack. Or just release the soundtrack in iTunes or something. It's really not that hard, right? Hello, and thanks for making it all the way to the end of this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to be kept updated on my latest activity, why don't you hit that subscribe button? If you're wondering what my next video is gonna be, it's gonna be Horrid Henry, Missions of Mischief for the DS. Ain't that fun?